Arrogant judge mocks teen, shocked when he outsmarts the entire courtroom. The courtroom was suffocating, not from heat, but from judgment. The heavy oak doors had barely closed when all eyes turned to him, and not a single one looked kind. 17-year-old Malik Carter stood alone before the towering bench, drowning in a suit 2 sizes too big. His older brothers, worn to interviews that led nowhere. Now it was Malik's armor, though it felt more like a costume meant to mock him. His fists clenched to stop the shaking. His chest rose too fast. The polished floor mirrored his fear. Weeks of studying, sleepless nights, and desperate hope now teetered on the edge of unraveling, under the crushing weight of silent contempt. Then came her voice. "Mr. Carter," said Judge Hawthorne, her tone laced with mockery so thick it echoed louder than the gavel she hadn't even raised yet. She was in her late 50s, white, with glasses perched at the tip of her nose, and a permanent scowl that made the deep lines in her face seem carved by years of judgment. She looked him over like she was inspecting a smudge on glass. "You're representing yourself?" She leaned forward slightly. "Do you think this is a game?" A wave of laughter rippled through the courtroom gallery. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, cruel, the kind of laugh that cuts deeper than a shout. Somewhere in the back, someone scoffed. Another whispered, "He's gonna crash and burn." The guard by the wall tried to stifle a smirk. From the prosecution's table, Assistant District Attorney Reynolds let out a low chuckle. His suit was pressed, his tie perfectly straight, and his face carried the calm smugness of someone who'd already written his victory speech. "Your Honor," he said with a glance at Malik, "I would strongly advise the defendant to reconsider. He's facing felony charges, not a high school debate." Malik swallowed hard. His heart thundered, but then he raised his chin. "I'm aware of the charges, Your Honor," he said, his voice steadying with each word, "and I've chosen to defend myself because I believe in the truth." The room fell silent, not out of respect, but disbelief. A 17-year-old black boy in an oversized suit claiming he could go up against a trained prosecutor in a courtroom designed to eat him alive? They didn't just doubt him, they resented him for daring to believe he had a chance. Judge Hawthorne exhaled as if Malik's words exhausted her. "Well," she said, tapping her gavel once, "this will be interesting." Interesting. That was the word people used right before they watched a car crash. Malik could feel it in the air, the weight of expectation that he would fail. They weren't here to see justice. They were here to see a spectacle. A kid drowning in legal language he couldn't possibly understand. A boy deluded enough to think knowledge could save him from the system designed to ignore him. But Malik didn't flinch, because behind the shaking hands and the too large blazer was a fire, burning bright, slow, and unforgiving. He knew what they saw when they looked at him. Poor, young, black, easy target, guilty before proven innocent. He'd seen it in the eyes of teachers, police officers, shop owners. He knew the weight of being judged without speaking a word. But today he would speak. Today he would force them to listen. He turned toward the jury. 12 strangers who looked at him like a child lost in a world meant for adults. But Malik wasn't lost. He was exactly where he needed to be. "I'm not here because I think I'm smarter than anyone," he said. "I'm here because I couldn't find anyone who believed I was worth defending." A sharp intake of breath. Somewhere someone stopped taking notes. Malik continued, his voice firm now. "I didn't choose this because it's easy. I chose this because if I don't fight for myself, no one will." The judge shifted in her chair. The prosecutor's smirk faded just a little. The air in the courtroom, once thick with dismissal, now felt charged, like the first rumble before a storm. Malik was no longer just a boy in a courtroom. He was a spark in a dry forest. The courtroom lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting sharp shadows across Officer Meyer's stiff uniform as he took the stand. His posture was rigid, arms crossed tightly as if daring anyone to challenge him. The badge on his chest gleamed under the fluorescent glare, and his eyes, cold, pale, unflinching, locked on Malik Carter like he was prey. "The night of the incident," Myers began, voice low and authoritative, "I responded to a 911 call reporting suspicious activity around a black sedan parked in a residential alley. When I arrived at approximately 10:04 p.m., I saw the defendant, He motioned toward Malik, not bothering to hide his disdain, leaning into the driver's side window, clearly attempting to tamper with the vehicle's ignition. When I announced myself and ordered him to stop, he immediately fled the scene. I pursued on foot and apprehended him roughly 3 blocks away. Gas fluttered across the gallery. The jury sat up straighter. Malik sat motionless at the defense table, his pen still, eyes fixed on Myers. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just listened. "To be clear," the prosecutor asked, stepping forward, "you are certain the defendant was attempting to steal the car?" "Without a doubt," Myers said. "He was actively fiddling with wires. Looked like he was trying to hotwire it." The words settled like a heavy fog across the room. Malik's heart beat against his ribs like a war drum, but his expression never changed. He leaned forward slightly, scribbling something onto his notepad. One word, distance. When the prosecutor finished, Judge Hawthorne turned to Malik. "Mr. Carter, you may begin your cross-examination." The room shifted. The atmosphere was different now. Tense. Watching a kid question a veteran cop wasn't something anyone expected to be interesting. But Malik stood up, buttoned his oversized blazer, and walked slowly toward the witness stand. Not with arrogance, but with purpose. "Officer Myers," he began, his voice calm and controlled. "You said you arrived at the scene at 10:04 p.m. and observed me attempting to tamper with the car. Is that correct?" "That's right. And how far were you from me when you made this observation?" Myers didn't hesitate. "About 25 feet. 25 feet, Malik repeated, nodding slowly. "And this was at 10 o'clock at night?" "Yes. No streetlights in that alley, correct?" "There were none directly overhead," Myers admitted, "but my flashlight was on." Malik walked back to the defense table, picked up a manila folder, and returned to the stand. His fingers trembled slightly as he pulled out a large photograph and held it up for the courtroom to see. "This," he said, "is a photo of the alley where the black sedan was parked, taken the morning after the incident." He handed it to the officer, then held up a second image for the jury. Same angle, wide shot. "Officer Myers," Malik said, "can you point to where you were standing when you first saw me?" Myers pointed at the far end of the photo. Malik circled the spot with a red marker. "And the car, here?" he asked, pointing at the other end. "Yes," Myers confirmed. Malik turned to the jury, his voice rising ever so slightly. "From 25 feet away, in the dark, with no overhead lights, and yet Officer Myers claims he saw me fiddling with wires inside the dashboard of this vehicle." He walked closer to the witness stand, lowered his tone. "Officer, are you familiar with the make and model of that car?" "I believe it was a 2009 Honda Civic," Myers said. "Perfect," Malik said. He pulled out a printed diagram of the car's interior. "Then you'll know that in this model, the ignition wires are not visible unless the lower panel of the dashboard is removed. That requires opening the driver's door and crouching down, none of which you mentioned." Myers shifted slightly in his seat. "So my question is, how exactly did you see me tampering with wires that are inside the dashboard, in near total darkness from 25 feet away?" The silence was instant and deafening. Myers' lips pressed together. "I saw your hands moving near the steering wheel," he muttered. "Near," Malik echoed. "But you told this court, under oath, that I was fiddling with wires. That's a very specific detail, officer." Reynolds stood abruptly. "Objection," badgering the witness. "Sustained," Judge Hawthorne said. But her eyes were locked on Malik now, not with mockery, but curiosity. Malik didn't let up. He turned to the jury again, voice steady and strong. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've all seen crime shows. We all know what it looks like when someone hotwires a car. But this isn't television. This is reality. And in reality, a police officer who's 30 feet away, in the dark, with no visual access to the dashboard, cannot possibly see what he claims he saw." A few jurors nodded slightly, but not everyone was convinced. From the gallery, someone scoffed quietly. A man in a business suit leaned over and whispered something to the woman next to him. One of the jurors crossed her arms and frowned. Malik felt it. Doubt still lingered. His truth was starting to cut through the lies, but the scars of prejudice ran deep. He could see it in their eyes. They were beginning to hear him, but they hadn't yet decided to believe him. Still, he pressed forward. Officer Myers, he said, voice low again. Did you have a body cam on during this incident? No, Myers replied. It was under maintenance that week. No dash cam footage from your vehicle? No. No other witnesses? None. Malik took a breath, letting the tension in the room stretch thin like glass. So, let me get this straight, he said. You claim to have seen me committing a felony from a distance of 25 feet in darkness, through a closed window, into a dashboard that was never opened, without a single recording or corroborating witness to support your statement? Myers clenched his jaw. No further questions, Your Honor, Malik said, walking back to his seat. He sat down slowly. His knees ached from the tension. His hands were still shaking beneath the table. But the silence in the courtroom wasn't mockery this time. It was something else. Doubt. For the first time since the trial began, they weren't so sure he was guilty after all. The next witness took the stand with a stiff back and pursed lips. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman, middle-aged, expensively dressed, and radiating entitlement, sat down like the courtroom owed her comfort. Her pearl earrings shimmered beneath the harsh lights as she folded her hands neatly in her lap. Casting a fleeting glance at Malik that held no sympathy, only silent accusation. The prosecutor wasted no time. Mrs. Whitman, can you describe what happened the night your car was allegedly stolen? She nodded primly. Yes, I parked my car, a black 2009 Honda Civic, in front of my house at approximately 9:30 p.m. I locked it, as I always do. When I came out the next morning, it was gone. I called the police immediately. And you had no idea who might have taken it? The prosecutor asked. None, she replied flatly, casting another look at Malik. Until they told me he was found inside it. The jury turned toward Malik, their expressions a mixture of concern and curiosity. The story was clean, simple, too simple. Malik sat still. His face betrayed nothing, but inside his pulse was pounding. The prosecutor continued. Was there any damage to your car? Broken windows, forced locks? Anything unusual? Mrs. Whitman shook her head. No, nothing. That's what surprised me the most. The doors weren't damaged, and the ignition was untouched. It looked exactly as I'd left it. A low murmur rose in the gallery. The prosecutor raised his voice above it. No further questions. Judge Hawthorne turned to Malik. Mr. Carter, your cross-examination. Malik rose slowly, calmly. He walked to the center of the courtroom and looked directly at Mrs. Whitman. The pressure in the room tightened. Mrs. Whitman, he began, you said your car was locked. Is that correct? Yes. And there were no signs of forced entry? No. Malik took a step closer. Then how exactly do you believe I got inside? She blinked, clearly caught off guard. I don't know. Maybe he had tools or something. Tools, Malik repeated, nodding. Did the police find any tools on me? She hesitated. I don't know. They didn't, Malik said sharply, turning to the jury. No tools, no broken windows, no forced locks. And yet I'm here, charged with grand theft auto, based solely on the fact that I was inside the car. He stepped to the evidence table and lifted a photograph of the vehicle, pointing to the intact driver's side door. If I broke in, how did I do it without leaving a trace, without setting off the alarm, without leaving a fingerprint? The courtroom was silent, all eyes on him now. Malik turned back to Mrs. Whitman. Are you absolutely certain no one else, no family member, had access to the vehicle that night? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Just for a second, the mask of certainty cracked. The courtroom door creaked open again. All heads turned as a man stepped in, shoulders slightly hunched, his face pale beneath thinning gray hair. He looked like someone who had never expected to be part of this trial, someone who wanted nothing more than to disappear. Dressed in khakis and a wrinkled dress shirt, Mr. Whitman walked slowly toward the witness stand, avoiding eye contact with his wife, who now sat rigid in her seat, jaw clenched so tight her cheekbones sharpened like blades. Malik stood motionless as the man was sworn in. This was it, the moment that could change everything or nothing. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Carter, proceed. Malik nodded once, then approached the stand. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. Mr. Whitman, please state your relation to Mrs. Eleanor Whitman. She's my wife, he said quietly. And you are also the co-owner of the black Honda Civic involved in this case? Yes. On the night in question, did you lend that vehicle to anyone? Mr. Whitman shifted. His fingers twitched. Yes, I let my nephew borrow it. Troy, a loud gasp erupted from the back row of the courtroom. Eleanor's eyes widened in shock, and her lips parted in horror, but no sound came out. Malik's gaze stayed fixed on the man in the witness chair. Let me be clear, he said. You gave your nephew the keys to the car? Yes, Mr. Whitman replied, now visibly sweating. He asked to borrow it for a date. I didn't think it was a big deal. And did you inform your wife about this arrangement? No, he muttered. I didn't. Why not? Mr. Whitman hesitated. He looked like a man walking toward his own execution. Then finally he exhaled. Because I didn't want to fight with her. She doesn't like him much. Thought he was irresponsible. Malik paused. His eyes flicked toward the jury. So to avoid an argument, you withheld the truth. The man nodded. Did you tell the police that your nephew had permission to use the car? No. Why? A beat, then quietly. I didn't think it would come to this. The words hung in the air like a noose. Malik stepped away from the witness stand and turned toward the courtroom, his voice rising with a fierce clarity that cut through the silence. Ladies and gentlemen, this trial has been built on the assumption that I stole a vehicle, that I intended to commit a crime. But now we know the truth. The car was never stolen. It was borrowed, with permission, from the legal co-owner. He took a few steps toward the jury box, his gaze burning into the eyes staring back at him. And yet, I was arrested, dragged into a system that didn't ask questions, that didn't investigate, that didn't even try to understand, because it's easier, safer, to throw the blame on someone like me. He pointed at himself, a 17-year-old kid, black, alone, wearing a hand-me-down suit and standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the weight of truth long held back. I wasn't arrested because I was guilty. I was arrested because I was convenient, because this system doesn't need facts. It just needs a target. And too often, that target looks exactly like me. The room was dead quiet. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly. The prosecutor looked like he'd swallowed glass. Mrs. Whitman was frozen in her seat, face drained of all color. Her husband refused to look at her. Malik took one final breath and delivered the sentence that had lived inside him since the day he was thrown into the back of that police car. I was arrested not because of what I did, but because of who I am. He returned to the defense table, but the tension didn't leave with him. It clung to the air, heavy and electric, like a storm hovering just beyond the courthouse walls. Still, no one moved. The jury sat paralyzed, not by confusion, but by the realization that everything they'd been led to believe was starting to collapse. That the confident officer, the polished prosecutor, the weeping car owner, they had all painted a picture with missing colors. And Malik had filled in the rest. But even now, despite the truth laid bare, Malik knew it wasn't over. Not even close. Because the truth wasn't always enough. Not when the system had already decided what it wanted to see. He looked down at his hands still trembling beneath the table. Around him, the courtroom began to stir. Chairs creaked, someone coughed, the judge scribbled something on her notepad, but the doubt still lingered. The fear still pressed against his chest like a weight. Because even after exposing the lie, he still wasn't free. And just when Malik thought the truth had finally pierced through the web of assumptions, revealing the car had never been stolen, the prosecution clung to one last thread. A grainy surveillance video they claimed would seal his fate. The lights in the courtroom dimmed as the bailiff rolled in a TV monitor and wheeled it to the center of the room. All eyes followed the grainy footage now flickering to life on the screen. Static danced briefly, then settled into a poorly lit alley captured by a fixed surveillance camera. The timestamp read 10:03 p.m. Rain drizzled in the frame like static falling from the sky. And then it happened. A shadowy figure entered from the left, walking briskly toward a parked black Honda Civic. The person glanced around, tugged at the door, slipped inside. A few seconds passed. Then the figure leaned toward the front console and ducked out of view. That was it. No clear face, no defining feature. Just a hooded figure moving in and out of the shadows. A blurry silhouette under a street lamp too far away to matter. When the footage ended, the courtroom was filled with the low hum of the monitor. Then silence. Heavy, expectant. Detective Langford, a large man with tired eyes and a thinning mustache, took the witness stand. He folded his hands over his stomach, as if he had already decided this was routine, just another step in a process designed to crush people like Malik. The prosecutor stood. Detective Langford, you're the lead investigator on this case, correct? I am. And is this the footage obtained from a local security camera near the scene of the alleged crime? Yes, it is. Does this footage match the defendant's timeline of events? The detective nodded. The timing lines up. The figure in the video enters the vehicle around the same time the suspect was apprehended nearby. And does that figure match the general description of Mr. Malik Carter? Langford shifted slightly. In terms of height and build? Yes. Thank you, detective. The prosecutor turned and sat down with the kind of smugness that suggested this was a slam dunk. Judge Hawthorne looked toward Malik. Mr. Carter, your cross-examination. Malik rose slowly. This time there was something different in his movement. Measured, controlled, like he was stepping into fire without flinching. He approached the stand. Detective Langford, I want to go back to the video we just watched. He motioned to the still frame frozen on the screen, an unclear shot of the hooded figure leaning into the car. Yes? Would you agree that the footage is less than perfect? Langford frowned. It's not the best quality, no. Would you say it's clear enough to make a facial identification? A pause, then a reluctant shake of the head. No, the face isn't visible. Malik nodded. So you cannot say with certainty that the person in the video is me. I can't say with absolute certainty, no, Langford admitted, shifting in his chair. But you can say the person's face isn't visible at all. Yes. Malik walked over to the jury, letting that answer hang in the air. So the state's strongest piece of evidence is a blurry video where no face can be seen, just a vague shape, a shape that could belong to 100 people in this courtroom. The tension spiked again. Several jurors leaned forward. Malik turned back to Langford. Detective, are you aware that Mr. and Mrs. Whitman's nephew, Troy, borrowed that same car the night of the incident? Langford looked unsettled. I learned that during this trial, yes. Would you say that Troy fits a similar height and build to mine? Langford hesitated. I suppose he could. Then, based on your own testimony, isn't it possible that the person in the video is Troy? Langford didn't answer immediately. He looked at the judge, then at the prosecutor. It's possible, he muttered. A few people in the courtroom gasped audibly. The prosecutor's face tensed. Malik's voice didn't rise, but the energy behind it grew sharper. So we have a vehicle that wasn't stolen, a figure on tape that no one can identify, and yet I'm the one handcuffed, tried, and dragged through this system like a criminal. He paused, waiting for anyone to object. No one did. But just as the tide seemed to be turning, Judge Hawthorne raised a hand. Mr. Carter, she interrupted, her voice as sharp as glass. Let's not forget, regardless of the vehicle's status, there remains the issue of resisting arrest. You fled from a police officer. You ran. Would you care to explain that to the court? The silence returned, colder this time. Malik's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, all the progress he had clawed for felt like it was slipping through his fingers. He looked around the room. The jury, the judge, the press. His mother in the back, gripping her rosary beads so tightly her knuckles turned white. The fight wasn't over. It had barely begun. The video hadn't cleared him. It had only proved what he already knew. The truth alone would never be enough. Because the system didn't care about clarity. It cared about control. And control meant silencing boys like Malik the moment they stepped out of line. He turned back to the judge, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of someone forced to fight battles he never asked for. Yes, Your Honor, he said. I'll explain. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. Malik could feel the weight of every eye on him, the tension so thick it clung to his skin like sweat. He stood alone. No lawyer, no advisor, No one but himself and the truth that had been clawing its way up from the pit of his chest since the night his life changed. Judge Hawthorne leaned forward. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice sharp but not unkind, "you've addressed the allegations surrounding the vehicle. Now explain to this court why, when a police officer ordered you to stop, you ran." This was it, the final noose, the last rope tying him to guilt in their eyes. Malik took a breath. His voice, when it came, was quiet, too quiet at first. But as he spoke, it grew stronger, layered with pain, defiance, and something deeper. Truth. "I ran," he said, "because I thought I was going to die." The words stunned the room. Somewhere in the gallery, someone gasped. The prosecutor shifted uneasily in his chair. Malik turned to the jury, his eyes scanning the faces that still held questions, still clung to doubt. "The man who chased me, he didn't announce himself as a police officer. He didn't wear a uniform. He didn't show a badge. All I saw was a large man sprinting toward me in the dark, yelling and grabbing for something on his belt." He paused, the memory flashing behind his eyes. "Where I come from," he continued, "that's not law enforcement. That's danger. That's how kids like me end up in morgues with no explanations, just assumptions." The judge didn't interrupt. No one did. Not now. Malik's tone hardened. "You want to know what ran through my mind that night? It wasn't escape. It wasn't guilt. It was survival. I thought someone was about to hurt me, maybe rob me, maybe worse. And I reacted the way I've been taught to react my whole life. Run first, survive second, explain if you're still breathing." He gripped the edge of the witness stand, knuckles white. "I didn't flee from justice. I fled from fear." The room was still, breathless. He let the silence linger before continuing. "Let me paint the picture clearer for you," he said. "It's late. I'm alone. I find a car I recognize from earlier. A car I was told to return. I go to check it. A man appears out of nowhere. No flashing lights, no sirens, no uniform. Just him, running at me. Would you have stayed?" His words landed like punches. Heavy, director. "True. And when I was tackled," he added, "he still didn't say anything. He cuffed me, slammed me into the pavement, told me I was under arrest after he pinned my face to the ground." He looked down at his hands, still scarred from the asphalt that night. "This system," he said, voice cracking, "it didn't pause to ask why. It didn't care about how I saw the world. It just saw me running, and that was enough." He took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly. "You know what's the worst part? If I hadn't run, and he hadn't been a cop, I might not be standing here at all. I might be lying 6 feet under, and no one would be asking questions. Just another headline. Just another mistake." Malik stepped back, turning once more to the jury. "You see a charge called resisting arrest. I see a survival instinct born from years of watching people who look like me get buried without answers." He didn't yell. He didn't cry. But every word echoed through the chamber like thunder. "I didn't run from justice," he repeated. "I ran from a threat I couldn't identify. And the only reason I'm here is because I had the luck. Not the right, the luck to survive that moment." The room was frozen in time. Even the judge, who had maintained an iron mask throughout the trial, seemed shaken. Her pen hovered above the paper in front of her, but didn't move. The court reporter's fingers slowed on the keys. No one spoke. No one could. Because for the first time in the trial, the truth wasn't just spoken, it was felt. It clung to the walls. It filled the air. It wrapped itself around the jury and the spectators, and even the bailiff standing motionless by the door. But the most heartbreaking part of it all, it still wasn't enough. Malik could see it. The flickers of sympathy, yes. The flickers of doubt, sure. But not the fire of justice. Not yet. Because in that courtroom, even the rawest truth had to fight for space. Even pain needed permission to be believed. He sat back down, his breathing steady now. But his eyes still burned with the injustice of having to explain his own fear to people who had never once lived it. And across the room, the prosecutor shuffled his papers, already preparing the next strike. The fight wasn't over. The chains of assumption were still wrapped tightly around him. But Malik had done what most never could. He stood up to a system designed to silence him and made it listen. The fight for justice is just beginning. More shocking twists are ahead. Don't miss a moment. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay with us. Thank you for standing for truth and justice. Where are you watching from? Let us know. Malik rose slowly from his chair, feeling every eye in the courtroom settle on him like lasers piercing his skin. The silence was dense, the kind of quiet that grips your throat and refuses to let go. Judge Hawthorne raised a cautious eyebrow, watching carefully as Malik straightened his suit jacket. Still oversized, still borrowed, still worn at the seams. He cleared his throat softly. "Your Honor," Malik began, his voice unwavering despite the pressure pounding in his chest. "I'd like to testify as my own final witness." The judge leaned forward slightly, as if considering his request. Finally, she nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Carter." Malik took slow, deliberate steps toward the witness stand, each footfall echoing louder in his own ears. As he sat down and faced the courtroom, he felt strangely calm, like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, fully aware that the only path forward was to leap. After swearing an oath to tell the truth, he steadied himself and raised his gaze directly toward the jury, meeting each of their eyes individually, searching for something: understanding, empathy, belief. "Ladies and gentlemen," Malik began quietly, his voice firm but gentle, "from the moment this case began, you've heard stories, seen evidence, listened to witnesses. But what you haven't heard yet is the truth from the person who lived it." He paused briefly, collecting his thoughts, steadying the emotions that threatened to bubble over. "From the second I was arrested, no one asked what really happened. No one gave me a chance to explain. Because the truth is, people like me, we're assumed guilty before we're given a chance to prove we're innocent." The tension in the courtroom thickened. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his watch. Malik pressed on, his voice stronger now, his confidence building. "When I was thrown into that police car," Malik continued, "all I could think was, why me? Not because I felt sorry for myself, but because I already knew the answer. I've grown up seeing this system from the outside. I've watched friends, neighbors, people who look like me, get swept up in accusations that turn into convictions before they can say a single word." He leaned forward, resting his elbows firmly on the wooden railing in front of him, eyes blazing with a raw intensity. "So when this happened to me, I made a decision. If no one else was going to fight for me, I'd learn how to fight for myself." A few jurors glanced at each other curiously, captivated by his growing passion. Malik took a deep breath, letting the truth flow freely. "I didn't have money for a lawyer. I didn't have connections. But I had something else: a library card, internet access, and determination born from desperation. Every night since my arrest, I've stayed awake until sunrise, poring over law books, studying cases, learning every bit of legal jargon I could grasp. I didn't do it because I wanted to become some courtroom hero. I did it because it was the only way I could speak a language this system would listen to." His voice lowered slightly, becoming almost hypnotic in its conviction. "I read cases about justice denied, about lives lost to wrongful convictions, about innocent people imprisoned for decades. Every page I turned was a lesson about how broken things really are. But it also showed me something else. Each injustice started with assumptions, with prejudice, with the same silent judgments you all made when you first saw me standing here." He allowed his gaze to sweep across the room, settling on the prosecutor for a brief second before returning to the jury. "I didn't steal that car, but in this courtroom, I've been forced to defend more than my innocence. I've had to defend my humanity. I've had to convince you that a black kid from a poor neighborhood could possibly tell the truth." Malik straightened his spine, lifting his chin defiantly. "I don't have a law degree, but the truth doesn't require credentials. Justice isn't exclusive to those who can afford it or understand its complexities. Justice is supposed to be about facts, about fairness, about hearing people out, not silencing them because of their age, or their skin color, or their zip code." He pointed directly at his chest. "If I, a 17-year-old black kid who society decided was guilty before even asking, can sit down, study, investigate, and uncover facts that trained detectives and prosecutors somehow missed? What does that say about the system itself? Malik paused, the silence now filled with unspoken agreement, quiet reflection, hesitant introspection. He lowered his voice to nearly a whisper, forcing the courtroom to lean closer. This trial isn't just about me. It's about a pattern, one we've ignored far too long. If I wasn't here defending myself, how many of you would have walked out of this courtroom assuming I was exactly who they said I was? He shook his head slowly. We can't keep doing this. We can't keep pretending everything is fine when innocent lives are hanging by threads. If I, someone with no power, no money, no training, can uncover truth, then the professionals in this system have no excuse. Something has to change. Malik took another deep breath, feeling the weight of every word he'd spoken settle over him. He leaned back slightly, his eyes softening, yet still fierce with determination. Maybe you think this isn't your fight, he said gently. Maybe you think I'm just one kid, one case, one small voice in a sea of bigger problems. But every injustice we tolerate becomes our legacy. Every silence we choose becomes our story. If today you listen and still find me guilty, you're not just condemning me. You're saying that a kid like me has no right to justice at all. His voice cracked slightly, emotion breaking through for the first time. I believe in truth. I believe in justice. Not because I've seen enough of it, but because I've seen so little. And if today I can stand here, telling you this, forcing you to think, then maybe tomorrow the next kid who stands here won't have to fight quite so hard. Malik rose slowly from the stand, walking back toward his seat. No one spoke. No one moved. His words hovered in the air, echoing silently through every heart and mind in the courtroom. As Malik sat down, the judge stared at him thoughtfully, her pen still frozen above the paper she'd been holding. Even the prosecutor was quiet, eyes cast downward, unable to deny the force of Malik's conviction. In that moment, the verdict was unknown. The jury remained unreadable, their decision still hanging in the balance. But Malik had done what few others had ever managed. He'd forced a courtroom full of strangers to confront the harshest truths of their own beliefs. He knew justice was never guaranteed. But right now, in this silence, he'd made them see him as human. And sometimes, Malik thought, his heart pounding fiercely beneath his ribs, seeing humanity clearly, just for an instant, could be the first step toward justice. He straightened his jacket again, feeling its oversized sleeves brushing his fingertips. He glanced upward, silently asking the universe for strength as he awaited the jury's final judgment. But no matter their decision, Malik Carter had already claimed his victory. Because in a system that thrived on silence, he'd refused to be quiet. Malik Carter sat motionless, every nerve ending in his body pulsing with raw anticipation. The courtroom felt impossibly small, suffocatingly crowded as the jury filed solemnly back into their seats. The clock's ticking was deafeningly loud, each second magnified by the weight of the moment. Malik's heart thundered relentlessly in his chest, a rhythmic drumbeat of hope and fear interwoven. His breaths were shallow but steady, his eyes unwaveringly locked on the jury foreman. Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict? Judge Hawthorne's voice sliced through the silence, clear and authoritative. The foreman, a man in his early 50s, with graying hair and deep lines of contemplation etched into his face, rose deliberately. We have, Your Honor. Please read the verdict. The man unfolded a piece of paper, the crisp sound cutting sharply through the tense silence. He cleared his throat and read, In the case of the state versus Malik Carter, on the charge of grand theft auto, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. An audible gasp rippled through the courtroom, a sudden storm of whispered disbelief. Malik's heart skipped, then hammered faster, adrenaline flooding his veins. On the charge of resisting arrest, the foreman continued, his voice slightly firmer, carrying the weight of moral conviction. We also find the defendant not guilty. The courtroom exploded in murmurs of astonishment. Malik's mother, seated in the far row, pressed trembling fingers to her lips, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. Malik himself sat frozen, momentarily unable to fully grasp the words he just heard. Not guilty. The two words echoed inside his mind. surreal and powerful. The prosecutor sank into his chair, shoulders slumping heavily, eyes fixed blankly on the table before him. The facade of confident arrogance he'd worn throughout the trial cracked visibly, replaced by quiet defeat. He had expected an easy victory, another conviction to bolster his record, but now faced an overwhelming public failure. Malik finally exhaled, his breath ragged with relief, disbelief, and an overwhelming surge of vindication. Yet beneath that relief lingered a deep-rooted bitterness, knowing the odds he'd faced, the prejudices he'd had to dismantle, and the injustice he'd narrowly escaped. Judge Hawthorne struck her gavel firmly, silencing the courtroom instantly. Her stern eyes swept over the assembly, ensuring their silence before speaking clearly, firmly. "The jury has spoken. Mr. Carter, you are hereby cleared of all charges. You are free to go." Slowly, shakily, Malik rose from his seat. The surreal nature of the moment left him dizzy, as though waking from a nightmare that had held him captive for too long. As he stepped hesitantly into the aisle, unsure of his next move, he felt a hand lightly touch his shoulder. Turning, he found Judge Hawthorne standing beside him, her expression surprisingly gentle, softened by respect. Her voice was low, meant only for his ears. "Mr. Carter," she began sincerely, "in all my years presiding over this courtroom, I've rarely encountered someone as courageous or determined as you. You didn't just prove your innocence today. You illuminated flaws deeply embedded within our system." Malik listened intently, still breathless from the overwhelming turn of events. The judge continued, her voice filled with unmistakable admiration. "This courtroom, this entire system, needs individuals who have your insight, your integrity, and your willingness to challenge injustice. Have you considered studying law professionally?" Malik hesitated momentarily, taken aback by the genuine encouragement from the woman who had initially seemed so distant and skeptical. Judge Hawthorne noticed his uncertainty and offered him a faint, encouraging smile. "Consider it seriously. The justice system desperately needs people like you, Malik. People who understand what it's like to stand alone against prejudice. People who refuse to accept injustice as inevitable." Her words resonated deeply with Malik, striking chords of purpose and clarity within him. For the first time in months, his future felt defined not by limits, but by possibilities. "Thank you," Malik replied softly, his voice sincere, eyes bright with newfound resolve. "I'll think about it." She nodded firmly, stepping back to her bench as the courtroom began to empty, filled with the low hum of conversation. Reporters gathered near the doors, preparing to broadcast the unexpected outcome to the world. Malik turned toward the exit, feeling a strange sensation of freedom intertwined with responsibility. Outside, he knew challenges still awaited, prejudices still thrived, and injustices still festered. Yet now he saw himself clearly, a force capable of igniting change, driven by truth, resilience, and courage. Walking slowly toward his waiting mother, Malik embraced her tightly. Her tears soaked into his jacket as she whispered words of pride and relief. Around them, sunlight filtered gently through courthouse windows, illuminating his path forward. As Malik stepped outside into the cool afternoon air, he paused, inhaling deeply, savoring the fresh, unburdened sensation of true freedom. Ahead lay a long, uncertain journey, but now he faced it armed not only with his own hard-won innocence, but also with a powerful purpose forged by injustice overcome. He knew now, more clearly than ever, that this wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference. Malik stood alone on the courthouse steps, watching the sunlight pour down onto the marble facade, each golden ray warming his skin, but failing to soothe the cold anger that still simmered beneath the surface. Even in victory, the pain lingered, a quiet storm of injustice that had battered him relentlessly. Voices echoed distantly as reporters crowded the sidewalk below, their questions a muffled buzz he chose to ignore. All he felt now was the sharp, crystal clarity of freedom and the heavy burden of knowing just how easily it had almost been taken away. As Malik took a deep breath, preparing to descend the stairs, he noticed a figure moving slowly toward him through the dispersing crowd. He squinted slightly, sunlight blurring his vision momentarily before recognizing Troy Whitman. The older teenager approached cautiously, his footsteps hesitant, eyes filled with deep remorse. Troy's gaze met Malik's briefly before dropping downward. He stopped a few feet away, shoulders hunched, his posture one of unmistakable regret. Malik studied Troy quietly, seeing a young man burdened by shame, embarrassment, and guilt. Troy's hands trembled as he pushed them into his jacket pockets, struggling to summon words. "Malik, I don't even know what to say, man," Troy began haltingly, his voice barely audible, choked by genuine emotion. "I never meant any of this to happen to you. I had no idea things would escalate this way." Malik remained silent at first, allowing Troy space to confront the gravity of the moment. Though fury had burned within him through endless sleepless nights, he saw clearly that Troy was not his true enemy. Malik's real adversary was much larger, far more insidious. A system designed to punish first, ask questions later. "I borrowed the car that night," Troy continued softly, guilt evident in every word. "My uncle told me it was fine, but I never mentioned it to anyone else. When you got arrested, I panicked. I knew I should have spoken up sooner, but I was scared, man. Scared of disappointing people, scared of consequences, but most of all, ashamed that my silence put you through hell." Malik watched carefully, recognizing sincerity in Troy's tear-filled eyes. Troy's remorse was raw, tangible, unmistakable. Yet Malik knew even this deep remorse couldn't undo the harm already inflicted upon him. Troy shook his head slowly, a heavy sigh escaping him. "I know it doesn't change what happened. Nothing can fix the damage already done. But please, Malik, just know how deeply sorry I am." Malik finally moved closer, his expression softening slightly, though intensity still burned behind his gaze. He placed a reassuring hand on Troy's shoulder, startling the older boy with the gentleness of the gesture. "Listen, Troy." Malik spoke softly but powerfully, each word deliberately chosen. "This was never truly your fault." Troy's eyes lifted abruptly, confusion crossing his face. "How can you say that? If I'd spoken sooner, if I'd done the right thing, you wouldn't have been dragged through this nightmare." Malik nodded patiently. "Maybe, but your silence wasn't what truly convicted me in their eyes. The moment I was arrested, they already believed I was guilty. They saw a young black kid and decided my innocence didn't matter. The system needed someone to blame, and I was convenient." Troy's expression shifted slowly from confusion to understanding. Malik's words resonated deeply, piercing the guilt-ridden fog clouding Troy's mind. "You really believe that?" Troy asked softly, almost whispering. "That even if I'd come forward earlier, they still would have tried to convict you?" Malik's eyes burned brighter now, conviction blazing. "I know it. The injustice wasn't just about the stolen car. It was about who they decided I was the moment they saw me. My guilt was decided by their assumptions, not your silence. You were trapped by fear. I was trapped by prejudice." Troy stood silently, absorbing the profound weight of Malik's truth. The world seemed quieter now, as though even nature itself had paused to hear the exchange. Malik continued calmly, his voice unwavering and passionate. "This isn't about blame, not yours anyway. It's about a broken system that forces people like us into impossible positions. It's about laws applied selectively, about privilege deciding who gets believed and who gets punished. You were afraid, Troy, because you understand how quickly things can spiral, how mercilessly the system crushes those caught within it." Troy's eyes welled with fresh tears, nodding slowly. "But what can we do? How do we change something so massive, so ingrained?" Malik's expression hardened again, resolve stealing his posture. "We start by refusing to stay silent. We speak truth even when our voices shake. We confront injustice whenever we see it, not just when it affects us directly. We demand change from those with power, and we refuse to accept anything less than real justice." Troy exhaled slowly, visibly inspired by Malik's strength. "You really think it's possible?" Malik smiled slightly, fierce determination illuminating his youthful features. If I can stand here, victorious after all they threw at me, then yes, anything is possible. But it's going to take more than just me. It's going to take everyone who's tired of seeing lives shattered, futures stolen, and voices silenced. Troy extended his hand slowly, genuinely, humbled by Malik's wisdom and compassion. Malik clasped it firmly, understanding passing wordlessly between them. The moment was quiet yet powerful, hope sparking vividly between two young men who had both suffered from a system designed to separate, silence, and punish. Malik spoke softly once more, reassuringly. I forgive you, Troy, but please don't carry this guilt forward. Use this pain as motivation. Help make sure no one else suffers what we endured. That's how we honor this struggle. Troy nodded earnestly, understanding completely. I will, Malik. I promise. Malik stepped back slowly, feeling a profound sense of peace despite the battle still looming ahead. The sun now seemed brighter, warmer somehow, illuminating clearly the path forward, a path toward justice, accountability, and profound systemic change. He watched Troy retreat slowly down the courthouse steps, disappearing into the bustling crowd below. Malik stood tall, feeling stronger now than ever before. He had survived a harrowing journey, faced a system built against him, and emerged not merely innocent, but awakened to a larger purpose. The fight wasn't over, not by any means, but standing on those steps, free and determined, Malik Carter knew exactly where his destiny lay. In challenging, dismantling, and rebuilding the very foundations of justice. He turned slowly, descending the courthouse stairs with confident strides. His eyes fixed firmly ahead, his spirit unbreakable, his heart driven by a burning commitment to truth. Malik Carter wasn't just free, he was empowered, and the fight for justice had found its newest, fiercest advocate. He knew now more clearly than ever before. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Malik Carter's journey from falsely accused teenager to a voice of unflinching truth reveals a human lesson about justice, empathy, and resilience. From his first night in a holding cell, he confronted a system that deemed him guilty before he spoke. His ordeal wasn't isolated. It reflected a deeper structural unfairness woven through countless courtrooms. Yet at every turn, he chose courage over despair and knowledge over resignation. By studying law books and refusing to plead out, Malik became a testament to self-advocacy and the unbreakable human spirit. Suspicion clung to him like a shadow. Many in his position would have bowed to hopelessness, but Malik refused to yield. He believed that understanding the law would help him escape the snare of false charges. Each piece of contradictory evidence he uncovered illuminated a relentless commitment to truth. He never let jeers or scorn deter him, and his struggle affirmed that no institution should go unquestioned when it targets the vulnerable. Malik also faced indifference from people who saw him as a statistic. They assumed his protests of innocence were an act, ignoring actual facts. His story underscores a grim reality. Far too many communities are forced to fight an uphill battle just to be presumed innocent. Yet Malik refused to let cynicism bury his hope. He pushed on, proving that persistence could crack the walls of prejudice. His nerves were tested, from humiliating interrogations to condescending remarks by the prosecution. But at each point, he clung to an unshakable sense of worth. Exposing flawed testimony and hidden biases, Malik tore open a wider wound, a legal structure that routinely fails to see the humanity of those it brands suspects. He showed how some demographics face stacked odds in court, where unspoken biases weigh as heavily as any evidence. Above all, Malik's efforts to challenge authority stand as a guiding light. His testimony wasn't just personal defense, it was a call for reform. By meticulously presenting facts, he forced everyone to confront how swiftly assumptions become verdicts. His story teaches that one determined voice can disrupt entrenched systems. That lesson resonates beyond the courthouse, inviting us to question who's being silenced everywhere else. He fought on two fronts, the formal accusations and social prejudice, revealing how daunting it is to prove innocence when society has already convicted you in its mind. Yet he did not lash out with hate. He channeled frustration into methodical legal research, learning that complex statutes can be navigated by anyone bold enough to try. The moral is twofold. First, injustice thrives where resignation reigns. Malik showed how knowledge and relentless truth-seeking can topple institutional arrogance. Second, empathy can reframe how we see both accused and accuser. If every jury, judge, and community member remembered the human story behind charges, we'd uphold innocent until proven guilty more sincerely. Malik's triumph wasn't about loopholes. It was honesty, logic, and righteous anger. The impact of his struggle serves as a warning to those content with the status quo. His resolute clarity made onlookers doubt the prosecution's convenient narrative. Even Judge Hawthorne, initially skeptical, urged him to pursue law. Through Malik, we realize that compassion can spark in unexpected corners if the truth is powerful enough. His story also reveals that injustice thrives in a culture of complicity. Police who arrested him saw a criminal, not a frightened teen. Witnesses who might have helped stayed silent. Media outlets sensationalized rather than investigated. Malik's battle became a push for accountability of police tactics, prosecutorial bias, and our willingness to accept a single story. He survived not just because of luck, but because he forced the world to see him. It reminds us how fragile innocence can be in a system where one detail could doom a person. Yet through it all, Malik refused cynicism. He used curiosity as an antidote to despair. That knowledge in the hands of the disenfranchised is a tool to expose illusions of untouchable authority. Another crucial piece is the solidarity that emerged when people witnessed the real Malik. Friends, family, and some unbiased observers grew outraged. A simple shift occurred. No longer a name on a docket, he was a teenager with fears, talents, and a right to fairness. That moment catalyzed broader reflections on biases, revealing the potential for communal awakening when confronted with raw truth. The message extends beyond a cautionary tale of wrongful accusation. It's a call to hold institutions accountable and challenge stereotypes. We must not let wealth, status, or race decide credibility. We must foster empathy in places where it's waning. True justice requires seeing the human being behind the allegations. Ultimately, Malik's triumph is more than personal. It's a catalyst for deeper conversations on fairness. A single, determined individual can highlight systemic cracks that many overlook. His voice soared with a plea: treat me as a person, not a stereotype. Listen to evidence, not presumption. His defiance shattered illusions, propping up a biased case. Hence, the moral of his journey is that justice demands vigilance, bravery, and empathy. Real change arises from those with little power, but immense heart. His unwavering belief in his own truth overcame prejudice. Each carefully structured argument chipped away at prejudice's walls, leaving a beacon for anyone forced to stand alone. No victory stands alone, however. Malik's acquittal started broader dialogues about accountability, sowing resilience in those who watched him succeed. He proved that refusal to break can carve a path for others. His story is a testament to the unstoppable force of the human spirit, to confront oppression and reshape the narrative through intellect and compassion. May his resolve guide us all, especially when silence and despair tempt us to yield. If Malik's journey taught us anything, it's that every stand against authority can spark transformative flames. At the same time, Malik's story reminds us of the crucial role that collective empathy plays in unraveling systemic bias. Throughout his ordeal, he witnessed moments where individuals broke through their own ingrained assumptions. A guard who once sneered at him might pause to wonder how a teenager could bear such composure. A journalist might hesitate before writing a sensational headline, having glimpsed Malik's fear and resolve in his eyes. Tiny shifts in perception, when multiplied across a community, can form the groundswell needed to demand structural change. Indeed, Malik's journey should prompt every observer to ask themselves, if we were in his shoes, would we find the strength to speak up in a hostile environment? Would we master the legal labyrinth in mere weeks, risking everything for the faint hope that justice might emerge if the truth were laid bare? This question extends far beyond courtrooms. It touches on how neighborhoods treat their youth, how schools handle disciplinary measures, and how workplaces handle grievances. Each time a young person is automatically deemed trouble, A chain of events can unfold that changes the course of that life forever. By shining a light on these unseen turning points, Malik's experiences press us to reevaluate how quickly we dismiss young voices, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds. If we can learn to listen sooner, to intervene with understanding rather than suspicion, perhaps fewer teenagers will ever have to stand alone in court, struggling against the tide of institutional indifference. Moreover, the subtle generosity shown by unexpected allies underscores the idea that no one is entirely powerless in this situation. The single mother who offered Malik a place to prepare his notes, the retired lawyer who shared a piece of crucial advice, the court clerk who accidentally revealed an inconsistency in the prosecution's paperwork, all these figures, however minor they seemed, became part of a fragile yet significant support network. Though the system itself felt monolithic, moments of kindness punctured that illusion, reminding us that institutions are composed of individuals whose decisions, good or bad, carry enormous consequences. By acknowledging our capacity to perform these small acts of support, we allow ourselves to become part of the solution, inching closer toward the version of justice that we claim to cherish. Malik's message rings especially powerful in a world where sensational narratives often overshadow nuanced truths. Social media might reduce a complex case to a clickbait headline. Politicians might leverage fears around crime for personal gain. Yet in Malik's journey, we see the necessity of depth, of looking beyond immediate assumptions and seeking the layers beneath. There is an inherent danger in letting superficial narratives dictate policy and public sentiment. Entire communities can be tarnished, entire generations demoralized, and entire families torn apart. By stripping away those simplistic frames, Malik forced everyone around him to confront uncomfortable realities, that none of us is immune to prejudice, that our biases can directly harm others, and that genuine accountability requires constant vigilance. Of course, the triumph of Malik's final acquittal is not an all-encompassing solution. Many face accusations without the resourcefulness or support that Malik discovered. Others lack even the basic literacy or financial stability to study their own case with the thoroughness he displayed. Hence, his victory is both inspirational and cautionary. It proves it is possible to overcome, but it also highlights how perilously narrow that path is. For every Malik who secures vindication, countless others remain lost in the labyrinth. The lesson here is not that the system works if one is determined enough, but that it often fails anyone without extraordinary resolve. We must therefore refuse complacency just because one individual overcame adversity. Instead, we should channel Malik's example into seeking reforms that ensure no one faces such harrowing odds to claim what should be guaranteed by law. If we look at Malik's story as a lens for broader societal critique, the common theme is how narratives can be weaponized, distorting reality so that society sees a suspect, not a child, an enemy, not an individual worthy of empathy. The shift occurs the moment we decide that certain groups are inherently more suspicious than others. At that point, an entire cascade of injustices becomes not just possible, but likely. From the day he entered that police station, Malik was battling more than a single accusation. He was battling centuries of ingrained bias, institutional inertia, and the human tendency to distrust those we perceive as different. While his ultimate victory reassures us that prejudice can be unmasked, it also tells us how fiercely we must guard against complacency if we hope to prevent such tragedies. Indeed, the moral weight of Malik's experience begs us to consider our personal spheres of influence. Whether as teachers, officers, neighbors, or co-workers, do we echo the system's bias by contributing to assumptions that label someone a lost cause? Do we fail to speak up when we witness misconduct, rationalizing that it's not our fight? The call to action embedded in Malik's tale is both simple and daunting. Challenge injustice wherever it appears, no matter how minor it may seem. Because what starts as a careless comment or an unfounded suspicion can spiral into a life-altering crisis for someone on the receiving end. The cost of silence is measured in real human lives and real human potential, both squandered. For those who find themselves, like Malik, staring down a system that seems determined to crush them, his story offers a blueprint of resistance. Arm yourself with knowledge. Seek the cracks in the armor of authority. Maintain composure when provoked, because rage can be used against you. But truth, calmly, repeatedly asserted, becomes undeniable. Most importantly, remember that every human institution can be challenged. The greatest danger lies in believing that we are powerless. Malik's unyielding stance rejects that notion, reminding us that as long as we can speak, we can refuse to let the official narrative define who we are or what we have done. In the context of such high stakes, the cinematic tension of Malik's fight for justice feels appropriate. Each revelation and contradiction builds suspense. Each small victory is overshadowed by the looming threat of a system that punishes with frightening speed. But in the end, the message he leaves us with transcends the courtroom drama.